Hospitals are supposed to hide you from death, but some learned how to hide death from you. The records looked clean, the wards kept smiling, and the bodies kept asking questions. Number 8. Mid-Staffordshire/Stafford Hospital Scandal. When Bella Bailey died at Stafford Hospital in 2007, her daughter Julie Bailey began asking why families had been ignored and why complaints had gone nowhere. Between 2005 and 2009, patients at Stafford Hospital were left in soiled beds, denied water, ignored after falls, and discharged unsafely, while Mid-Staffordshire NHS Foundation Trust chased targets and foundation status. The Francis Inquiry, chaired by Sir Robert Francis QC, confirmed systemic neglect and made 290 recommendations. Press and campaign accounts put excess deaths at 400 to 1,200, but the report did not fix a single death toll. Bailey founded Cure the NHS and helped drive the independent inquiry when local institutions tried to contain the damage. What this told you was stark. The problem was not one mistake. It was a culture that dismissed suffering, buried complaints, and treated accountability as a threat. The later duty of candor came from that failure, and Stafford became the warning that the next inquiry could not ignore. Number 7. Bristol Royal Infirmary Children's Heart Surgery Scandal. On March 26, 1992, after years of warning signs, Samantha Rickard died following heart surgery at Bristol Royal Infirmary. The inquiry that followed exposed a decade of failure in the pediatric cardiac unit, where babies and children underwent complex operations between 1984 and 1995, despite mortality rates for some procedures running at about twice the national average. When the public inquiry reported in July 2001, its conclusion was stark. 30 to 35 children operated on between 1991 and 1995 probably would have survived if they had been treated elsewhere. Surgeons James Wishart and Janardhan Dasmana became central figures. Anesthetist Dr. Stephen Bolson had raised concerns, but his warnings were marginalized inside a closed club culture that treated poor outcomes as a threat to reputation, not as evidence demanding action. Families were denied the candor they needed about risk, performance, and why their children had died. Bristol showed how hierarchy can turn preventable deaths into protected knowledge. The next failure would make that protection even harder to excuse. Number 6. Winterbourne View Hospital Abuse. After Bristol, the warning signs are no longer hidden in operating data. They are visible in a locked corridor as a frightened patient is pulled, mocked, and held down while a hidden camera keeps recording. This was a private hospital in South Gloucestershire, England, for people with learning disabilities and autism. And on May 31, 2011, BBC Panorama broadcast footage from inside it. The film showed staff assaulting, taunting, restraining, and humiliating vulnerable patients, including scenes described as people being dragged, held under chairs, and left in locked corridors. Terry Bryan, a former nurse, had raised concerns before the broadcast, but regulators and managers failed to act decisively until the evidence reached the public. Afterward, the Care Quality Commission said the owners had failed to protect people from abuse. 11 people pleaded guilty to neglect or abuse offenses, and 6 were jailed. What this exposed was not only cruelty inside one building, but a system that needed television proof before it believed the people trapped inside it. And the next case would show an even quieter kind of institutional breach. Number 5. Alder Hey organ scandal. At Alder Hey Children's Hospital in Liverpool, England, the breach reached families after they had buried their children. Over 15 years, from 1981 to 1996, organs and body parts were removed and stored after postmortems without proper parental consent. The scandal emerged between 1999 and 2001, when parents of children who had died learned that hearts, brains, eyes, fetal tissue, and body parts had been kept after funerals. The Royal Liverpool Children's Inquiry examined a large retained collection and focused on Professor Dick Van Velzen, who the inquiry found had systematically falsified post-mortem reports. It also found the practice was widespread across NHS hospitals, not confined to Liverpool. By 2001, the report described deception, malpractice, management failures, and an evasive attitude toward bereaved parents. You can see the warning signs in the sequence: secret retention, false records, cautious denials, and parents left to uncover the truth themselves. The inquiry found not a rogue pathologist, but a system that had decided parents did not need to know. Number 4. Morecambe Bay maternity deaths. In 2008, Joshua Titcomb died at Furness General Hospital in Barrow-in-Furness after signs of infection were missed. His father, James Titcomb, asked a basic question: how could a newborn become so ill without the danger being acted on? The answer exposed something larger than one failed shift. Across university hospitals of Morecambe Bay NHS Foundation Trust, mainly from 2004 to 2013, the Kirkup report found a maternity unit split by mistrust, with midwives and doctors working against each other when mothers and babies needed coordinated care. Deaths were reviewed too narrowly. Families were given accounts that did not match the evidence. What this tells you is that the danger was not only clinical, it was institutional. The report identified 20 significant or major care failings, linked to 3 maternal deaths and 16 baby deaths. It found that different care would have been expected to prevent 1 mother's death and 11 babies' deaths. Joshua's case became emblematic because his father had to force out answers the trust should have pursued itself. Morecambe Bay was not a mystery. It was a warning system that chose not to hear its own alarms. Number 3. East Kent maternity scandal. Worse still, after the alarms at Morecambe Bay, the sound in East Kent was the same thin cry from a neonatal unit, followed by the quieter noise of records being softened. At East Kent Hospital's University NHS Foundation Trust in Kent, England, maternity and neonatal services failed families mainly between 2009 and 2020. The independent Kirkup investigation, published in 2022 under the title Reading the Signals, reviewed 202 cases and found that outcomes could have been different in 97 of them. Those cases involved 45 babies who did not survive and 12 babies who suffered brain damage. The failures were not obscure. Poor monitoring, delayed escalation, and a dysfunctional clinical culture appeared again and again. Harry Richford was born at Queen Elizabeth the Queen Mother Hospital in Margate in 2017 and passed away at 7 days old. An inquest later found his outcome was wholly avoidable. The report was blunt about what followed: denial, minimizing adverse features, omitting key facts, and treating catastrophic outcomes as expected. By now, the scandal is no longer only what clinicians missed. It is what institutions learned to explain away, and the next step is even colder. Number 2. Gosport War Memorial Hospital opioid deaths. Before the public knew the name Gosport, families knew the pattern. Frail elderly patients went in for care, and some were placed on powerful opioids delivered through syringe drivers without clear clinical need. At Gosport War Memorial Hospital in Hampshire, England, the main period ran from 1989 to 2000. The independent panel report arrived on June 20th, 2018. It found 456 patients whose deaths followed opioid use without appropriate clinical indication. It said more than 450 lives were shortened, with at least another 200 probably affected once missing records were considered. Dr. Jane Barton, a clinical assistant, was the prescribing doctor whose practice became the central focus of the inquiry. Relatives of Gladys Richards, admitted for rehabilitation after a hip operation, helped force the case into the open. What you see here is not one missed warning. Families raised alarms. Coroners failed to expose the pattern. Regulators and NHS managers failed to stop it. Professional bodies protected reputations before patients. Police later identified 24 suspects in a renewed investigation. 24 suspects. Nearly 30 years. No criminal convictions. That is what institutional failure leaves behind. Number 1. Lucy Letby and Countess of Chester neonatal murders. After Gosport, the pattern returns in a smaller room with smaller patients and the same fatal weakness. At the Countess of Chester Hospital neonatal unit, babies collapsed again and again between June 2015 and June 2016. The nurse later named in court was Lucy Letby. Prosecutors said she used air injection, insulin poisoning, and overfeeding, methods that turned ordinary clinical spaces into places of serious criminal concern. In August 2023, a jury convicted her over the loss of 7 babies' lives and trying to cause fatal harm to 6 more. In July 2024, she was convicted of another attempt to cause fatal harm. The sentence was whole life orders. By then, consultants had already described a second failure. Dr. Stephen Breary and Dr. Ravi Jayaram said they repeatedly raised concerns about Letby. Doctors later said senior managers delayed calling the police and pressed consultants to apologize to the nurse they suspected. The Thirlwall Inquiry is examining how those warnings were handled. What this tells you is simple. The danger was not hidden in silence. It was spoken aloud, inside the hospital, and still left beside the incubators.